Welcome to Raising the Bar. I am Ashley Vargas, and I help lifters feel more confident adding weight to their barbell. Hello, lifters, and welcome to episode number 5 of Raising the Bar. In today's episode, we are going to dive into nutrition, specifically performance nutrition for strength athletes. So nutrition arguably is probably one of the hardest parts of any healthy routine, no matter what type of training you're doing. There is always going to be temptation. There's always going to be obstacles that get in the way. Life is going to happen. Social events come up. You name it, we all deal with it. And at some point, we're probably going to fall off track, and that's pretty normal. However, when it comes to nutrition, the key is really to be consistent. But really what I think the bigger issue is, and what most people face as far as nutrition goes, is just a lack of knowledge around proper nutrition that is going to support your goals. So nutrition is not a one size fits all. It's very dependent on the individual. But unfortunately, we live in a society that consistently promotes diet culture and sadly has successfully convinced people that you always need to be at a caloric deficit and you always need to be trying to lose weight in order to be fit and healthy. On top of that, fad diets that promote cutting out an entire macro group to lose weight, those have become so popular in today's culture. Do they work? In the short term, yes, they do for most people, but it's not because you are cutting out carbs. It's not because you are cutting out fat or adding more fat in or whatever the case may be. It's because when you cut out an entire macro group, you're, as a result, reducing the caloric intake, which is putting you at a caloric deficit, which is what is causing the weight loss. It's not the fact that it was the carb that you cut out. It was the fact that you now have reduced your caloric intake. So the biggest issue with these fad diets is they're not sustainable. Like you cannot go your entire life without eating a carb. It just can't happen. And so eventually you're going to be adding those macro groups back in. And when you do, it's most likely going to be at an excess, and which is going to increase your caloric intake, probably to an excess, which is going to cause you to put more weight back on. So in today's discussion around nutrition, we're going to be focusing more on performance nutrition specifically for strength athletes. So I'm going to dive into each macronutrient, why they're important for strength athletes, when they should be consumed in relation to a training session. And then I'm also going to discuss some supplements that I recommend that provide proper macro and micronutrients. And we're also going to discuss a little bit how to properly cut if you need to make weight for a meet without sacrificing the strength in the process. Strength athletes put their bodies through very intense training sessions almost every single time. So the training sessions take a major toll on the body. And if you are not fueling your body properly or taking, the adequate recovery measures, your body's not going to be able to sustain that. So the one thing that athletes have that most other people don't is the mindset that food is fuel. So food is going to serve a purpose that's going to enable the body to perform at its best. And most athletes have a full, well, professional athletes will say, have a full team of like nutritionists and dietitians that are planning their meals down to every single little tiny grain of rice. And it's all prepared in advance for them. So for those of us that don't have that benefit or that access, you can still have success in the kitchen as well as in the weight room. So we, in the fitness world and in the nutrition world, we throw around the term, macro all the time. But what is a macro? Macro is short for macronutrients, which are your proteins, your carbohydrates, and your fats. So each macro, is going to provide a different fuel source and serve a different purpose in the body. Where things tend to get a little confusing is determining how much of each macro you should be eating and when you should be eating them. Diet culture has told us that we should not eat carbs at night and that we shouldn't eat a lot of calories at night. Well, if you are a strength athlete that trains at 7 p.m., that's when you're going to need the bulk of your calories, right? Because carbs, if you think about it, they have the exact same amount of calories at 6 a.m. as they do at 6 p.m. So it really has nothing to do with when you eat them. It's in relation to morning or evening. But it has a lot more to do with, are you going to be using that energy source as efficiently as possible, or is it you're going to be putting it in your body and it's just going to be excess energy that your body is going to store? So with that being said, let's kind of dive into the details of each macro here, starting with protein. So dietary protein is used to create new tissue. It repairs the breakdown of tissue, and it's also required to promote muscle growth. So clearly, this is going to be a key component for a strength athlete with a goal of building strength over time, which of course is going to require the growth of new muscle mass over time. So this is a key point as to why strength athletes should not run at a caloric deficit. And there are some lifters that never need to drop weight and probably never eat at a caloric deficit. So if you think about it, muscle and fat get put on the exact same way, and that's going to be through a caloric surplus, meaning you're eating more calories than what you're burning, or you're putting into your body more than what's coming out. So the way to ensure that you're putting on the right type of size is going to be through good quality food choices and proper training. That way that energy is going to get converted into muscle mass instead of just being stored as fat. Another reason why strength athletes need to consume an adequate amount of protein is to ensure they are consuming essential amino acids. Protein itself is made up of 20 amino acids, but only 9 of them are essential. And what an essential amino acid is, it's an amino acid that your body does not produce on its own. So you can only get them through proper nutrition. So when an athlete does not consume adequate amount of protein and they're not getting those essential amino acids that are key to that building and recovery process, it's really going to put the athlete at risk for slower muscle growth, slower strength gains, and also a slower recovery process. So when talking about protein, like how much do we actually need? So American College of Sports Medicine, which is also the guidelines that I use when I am doing nutrition plans for my athletes, they recommend 1.2 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So how the hell do you calculate that? So I'll use myself as an example here. So I weigh 74 kilograms. So I would then take 74 and multiply it by 2, because I like to be on the higher end of the protein scale. Multiply it by 2. So therefore, I would require 148 grams of protein per day. So usually for my female athletes, I'll go more towards the lower end, that 1.2, 1.5 range. And then the male athletes, I tend to recommend a little bit more, like closer to the higher end of 1.8 to a 2. So timing on protein intake should be pretty consistent throughout the day. It's not necessary to eat 1 or 2 meals that are higher in protein than others, but having consistent amount of protein throughout the day is also going to help to keep you satisfied, keep you full, and give you that consistent energy that you're going to need. Let's transition into talking about carbs. Carbs have gotten such a bad rap over the years, and it's so unfortunate because it is a key macro, not just for performance nutrition, but overall nutrition and overall health in general. So I keep referencing diet culture, but it's because diet culture has given us all this lovely misinformation that people take as fact, and it's it's not true. So, but according to diet culture, carbs are going to make you gain weight. Carbs will negatively impact your body comp, and carbs are going to make you bloated. When in reality, carbs are your body's primary source of energy, and it's what allows your body to function properly. Carbs are not an issue and they don't cause weight gain. But like I mentioned before with protein intake, it only converts to fat when you are taking in more calories than what you're burning and not training to utilize that excess energy to build muscle. So it's not the carbs, it's the excess calories that are coming from a lack of proper movement while you're eating those carbs. So if you think of it this way, if carbs are your body's first source of energy and that energy is not being utilized, your body is not going to tap into its secondary source of energy, and it's not going to, if it's not utilizing the first one. Your body's second source of energy after it burns through all of the carbs is going to be its protein, and then the third source is going to be fat. So you're not actually getting to the fat until you've burnt off all of the carbs and all of the protein. So if you think of, like, big trucks that have dual gas tanks, right? It's the truck's not going to tap into the second gas tank until the first one's empty. So if you're taking in all of these excess calories and not utilizing it through training in order to build muscle, all of that excess energy is just going to sit there and be stored. So then it becomes very clear as to why carbs are going to be such a crucial source of energy for strength athletes. Timing on carbs, though, is going to be a little bit more crucial and technical than it would be on protein, and should strategically be placed within the meals. So, athletes should prioritize carbs in their pre and post training meals. Your pre training meal should have a carb source like rice, for example, that's a little bit lower in fiber. So, it's going to be able to process and convert into energy very fairly quickly. So, you can utilize that during your training session. Post training meal should be your highest carb meal of the day and have a little bit higher fiber content. So you can eat foods such as like potatoes or oats or something that's going to be a little bit slower digesting than what a rice would be. Also, as a pre workout, fruit is also a really good option. Again, some of the lower fiber options. That way, your body can quickly tap into those sources and use that as immediate fuel for your lift. Fats are going to be the final macro that we're going to talk about. Fats for strength athletes are typically going to be a lower priority compared to proteins and carbs, but still are going to be crucial in performance as well as overall health. Fats are the slowest digesting macros, so eating meals that are going to be high in fats is not going to be ideal for a pre and a post training meal. However, you should focus your fats on those non training centered meals. And then usually those rest days are going to have a little bit higher fat content. Healthy fats are crucial for proper hormone balance, as many hormones are produced from molecules derived from essential fatty acids, such as your omega 3s and your omega 6 fats. Essential fatty acids, specifically omega 3s, are also going to help to reduce inflammation in the body, which obviously strength training can cause. So, even though fats do not play an immediate role in like the building of muscle, like proteins and carbs do, they're still going to be key to overall health and recovery. Um, and because of the hormone regulation benefits of essential fatty acids, I usually have my female athletes have a higher fat intake in relation to their body weight compared to my male athletes. However, with that being said, I mentioned this before, nutrition is not a one size fits all. So, there are going to be some male athletes that are going to require a little bit higher fat and some female athletes that are going to require a little bit lower. Now that we have a good understanding of the three different macros, the impact they have on the body, and what's required for a strength athlete, let's transition into supplements. Supplements become very popular in the training and fitness world. However, when it comes to supplementation, I always recommend myself and all of my athletes eat as many, if not all of their macros through whole foods prior to utilizing supplements. I think supplements are great. They serve a purpose, they have their place. However, they are not meant to be a replacement for a whole food. They're meant to supplement what you can't get through whole foods. So, protein is usually the hardest macro for most people to hit. If you can't get your protein requirement in through whole food, protein supplements are a great way to ensure that you're hitting that minimum macro target and feeding those muscles with all of those necessary essential amino acids. That way, you can support that building and recovery process. You can also take an EAA, which is an essential amino acid supplement they're typically calorie free and still contain all of those essential aminos to support and aid in that recovery. When you take those, I usually recommend taking them as an intra workout, so drinking them as you're training. Most athletes don't require a carb supplement, but personally, I do use one. I use one during every training session, actually. So, just kind of speaking for myself here for a second, I do not like to eat heavy meals or eat a lot of carbs before I lift. I'll eat a couple carbs through whole foods and then like prior to my training session, and then I'm drinking liquid carbs mixed with my EAAs throughout my lift. That way, it's going to give me like quick, very easily digestible, fast acting energy source that's not going to sit heavy on my stomach. That works best for me, but I do work with some athletes that like to eat a full on meal 30 minutes before they lift and they end up feeling great. So, again, it's not a one size fits all. Everyone's going to be a little bit different. But if you are someone that doesn't like to eat a lot before you lift, doing a carb supplement is going to help to give you that quick energy. Most people are not going to require a fat supplement of any kind. However, I do recommend that everyone take at least an omega 3 supplement. Unless you have a lot of fish in your diet and you eat it pretty consistently, everyone should be taking an omega 3. I mentioned earlier that omega 3 fatty acids are great for helping in the reduction of inflammation in the body. And if you are a strength athlete, you are definitely going to get inflammation from your training sessions, especially if you're not doing anything to reduce that. So, want to make sure that you add that into your diet. Um, when we talk about the concept of micronutrients, which is, macro versus macro are going to be your proteins, carbs, and fats. Micros are going to be all of like your vitamins and minerals, things like that. Generally speaking, if you are eating quality whole foods, you really don't need to worry about supplementing your micronutrients. With that being said, I do think it's a good idea for everyone to take at least a multivitamin. Even if you are hitting all of the micronutrients through whole foods, which good for you if you are, your body is just going to absorb what it needs out of that multivitamin, and then it's going to pass the rest. So there's really no harm in adding that into your daily routine. So I've talked a lot about how most strength athletes need to be at either maintenance caloric intake or a surplus caloric intake, and then paired with training and proper nutrition is then going to convert that excess energy into muscle mass, and then as a result, increase strength. But what if you are a lifter who is prepping for a meet and your competitive weight is lower than what you're currently sitting? And it's very common actually for strength athletes to drop weight for a meet. And then when they're not in prep for a meet, they sit at a higher weight. I do that. A lot of my athletes do that. It's very common. So, how the heck do you drop weight if you need to maintain your strength? The answer is very, very slowly. um, I recommend starting the cutting process sooner than later in the prep. The slower you can drop weight, the less it's going to shock your body. So for me, if I'm slowly cutting weight over 12 weeks, for example, I usually sit about 8 to 10 pounds heavier than what my competitive weight is. So as I'm trying to drop weight, if it's very slow and very consistent, I'm really not going to notice as I'm training and prepping for that meet. Where it really becomes an issue is if you're 2 weeks out from your meet and you're still 10 pounds over what you should be. Well, at that point, I would highly recommend do not deplete yourself. Do not try and do a drastic cut. Just register for a higher weight class and go in and give it your all. It makes so much more sense to go in feeling confident and strong and know that you're able to pick up that weight at the current body weight that you're at versus trying to cut and completely deplete your body and then underperforming on the platform. So all of that, the cutting process should be very strategically planned out by your coach, and very technical, and your coach should be consistently moderate consistently monitoring your weight. That way, your coach is going to know exactly what your progress is and what they need to do on a weekly basis, to tweak those macros to make sure that you're not losing weight too quickly or not losing weight fast enough, and be able to make those adjustments quickly. As your coach is strategically writing out your nutrition plan, they're most likely, again, this is not going to be for everyone, but most likely they're going to plan in a free meal. And let me tell you, I live for a good free meal. Free meals, or cheat meals, some people call them. Free meals are anything that the athlete wants to eat, and typically is going to include foods that are not on a healthy plan, such as, pizza, cake, sugar, whatever. But free meals, just like the rest of the nutrition plan, are done so very strategically. I'm going to preface the rest of the conversation about free meals by saying if you are not following the nutrition plan that your coach has set out for you, your free meal is not going to have the same benefit and may actually hinder your performance and hinder your body comp. So, with that being said, just like lifting, our metabolism can come to a plateau. So, this happens when you're eating the same type of foods in the same quantities, for a significant amount of time. Your body is going to become so used to those foods and adapt to those foods that it's not going to have the same effect on your body comp, as it did in the beginning. So if you think of your metabolism as a fire, as the fire starts to die down, you're going to need to add a fuel source in order to keep it burning. So in this case, the free meal is going to be the fuel source for the metabolism fire. Once you introduce your body to foods that it's not used to eating, it's going to trigger your metabolism to go into like overdrive in order to break down all of those, higher fats, higher carbs, all of those extra things that your body doesn't normally take in. And often after a free meal, most people can actually drop weight because their metabolism went into overdrive. And they're also going to look a lot leaner that next morning. Most coaches typically plan free meals on like a heavy leg day or a heavy deadlift day, where their body is going to be utilizing that source pretty well. For me, I actually like to eat my free meal the day before I'm going to do those things, but whether it's a heavy squat or a heavy deadlift, something where I'm going to need a lot of energy. But again, that really all depends on the lifter. Again, that is only going to work and you're only going to see those benefits if you're following the nutrition plan leading up to that free meal. So make sure that you're doing that. Otherwise, it could very well have an adverse effect. Regardless of what type of nutrition plan you're on, consistency is always going to be the key to success. And that comes with your training, it comes with your nutrition, it comes with your recovery habits, it comes with your sleep, it comes with everything. Consistency is going to be the key. So tying this all together, what are some of the big takeaways from today's episode? I always leave you with 3. The first one, strength athletes need to focus on fueling the body over being at a caloric deficit. If you are focusing on good quality foods and training properly and strategically, the strength and muscle growth is just naturally going to follow. The second one, if you are cutting for a meet, slow and steady is going to win the race. Cutting too quickly is going to put you at risk for sacrificing strength on the platform. And the third one, supplements should not be a replacement, but a support for a well-rounded nutrition plan. And then I guess I can throw a fourth one in there. Follow your coach's nutrition plan. Pretty straightforward. So I hope that you found this helpful. Thank you so much for listening. If you did find this helpful, please subscribe and share with your fellow lifters, and I will see you all next week. As a special thank you for tuning into this episode, I am providing you with free access to my most recent Athlete's Guide, 3 drills to improving your squat depth. Make sure to click the link in the notes of this podcast to download your copy today. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and then share this podcast on all of your social media platforms. And I will see you on the next episode of Raising the Bar.